welcome to this Friday edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. As always, we have a packed show for you with all the top news stories from around the globe. Let's get started with our big focus, which is on the US presidential election. Kamala Harris sat down for her first interview as the Democratic presidential nominee on Thursday and outlined her policies on a range of key issues that may well define the 2024 US presidential election. And of course, she also responded to the constant personal attacks on her by her Republican rival, Donald Trump. When CNN asked Harris why her policies on immigration and climate have changed since she ran for president in 2019, Harris said, "I think the most important aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is that my values have not changed." The US Vice President referred to her effort to address climate change and support of the Green New Deal, a democratic proposal to reduce reliance on fossil fuels, as something that remains a steadfast value when pressured about her shifting policy positions. She said, "I've always believed, and I've worked on it, that the climate crisis is real and that it is an urgent matter." She also pointed to the Biden administration's work on the Inflation Reduction Act, which funneled hundreds of billions of dollars to renewable energy and electric vehicle tax credit and rebate programs. But Harris did not explain her reversal on banning fracking, a technique for recovering gas and oil from shale rock used by an industry that is particularly strong in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. In 2019, Harris had said, "There is no question I'm in favor of banning fracking." But she has backpedaled on that view since becoming vice president. On Thursday, she said, "As president, I will not ban fracking." On the hot-button issue of immigration, Harris once held more progressive views as a senator and in her campaign for president in 2020. She had previously advocated for the closure of immigration detention centers and decriminalization of illegal crossings. But on the subject of securing the US border, Kamala Harris said on Thursday, "My values have not changed," and referenced her time prosecuting transnational criminal organizations as California's Attorney General. Now, Trump has made attacking the Biden administration's handling of the US-Mexico border a signature issue of his campaign. But Harris said Trump bears much of the blame for the border security problems that he keeps whining about. She pointed to his opposition to the bipartisan border security bill. She said because he believed that it would not have helped him politically, he told his folks in Congress, "Don't put it forward." He killed the bill, a border security bill that would have put 1,500 more agents on the border. Asked if she would push that bill if elected president, Harris said, "Not only push it, I would make sure that it would come to my desk and I would sign it." She also said she does not support decriminalizing illegally crossing the border into the United States, reversing another position that she took during her 2019 presidential run. She said, "We have laws that have to be followed and enforced and deal with people who cross our border illegally, and there should be consequences." To explain her changed view on immigration, the Democratic nominee said her travels across the country as vice president had made her believe it is important to build consensus and it is important to find a common place of understanding of where we can actually solve problems. Kamala Harris has also committed to include someone who was a Republican in her presidential cabinet. She said it would fulfill her promise to be a president for all Americans. She told CNN, "I've spent my career inviting diversity of opinion. I think it's important to have people at the table when some of the most important decisions are being made that have different views." There is recent precedent for cabinet selections that cross party lines. Former President Barack Obama appointed several Republicans to high-ranking positions. During the interview, Vice President Kamala Harris was forced to defend the White House's economic track record as inflation and high cost of living prices continue to hurt Americans. Polls have regularly indicated that voters would prefer Trump's handling of the economy. On Israel's war in Gaza, Harris reiterated the White House's position that both Israel and Hamas must get a deal done and that the Palestinians deserve to have their own country neighboring Israel. She said, "This war must end and we must get a deal that is about getting the hostages out." Harris argued that Israel must have the right to defend itself, but that far too many Palestinian civilians have been killed. However, Harris refused to commit to an arms embargo on Israel, as some of her party's left flank have demanded. Kamala Harris largely sidestepped questions around Donald Trump's claims about her racial identity. Last month, Trump questioned Harris's racial identity, suggesting she had previously identified as South Asian but happened to turn black for political purposes. Shaking her head, Harris said Trump's remark is part of his same old tired playbook. Next question, please, she said. Her refusal to comment further is in line with her campaign strategy to avoid leaning into identity politics following Trump's remarks. It could also indicate how Harris might handle future challenges to her race and gender during her first debate with the former president in the month of September. But Harris took Trump to the cleaners on the issue of divisive politics. She said, and I quote, "I think sadly in the last decade we've had in the former president someone who has really been pushing an agenda and an environment that's about diminishing the character and strength of who we are as Americans, really dividing our nation." Harris also described the moment when President Biden called her to share that he had decided to end his re-election bid. When asked if she asked for his endorsement, Harris said, "My first thought was not about me, my first thought was about him." Adding that Biden could have served again, Harris said she believes history will show Biden's presidency was transformative and view his decision to withdraw from the race as one that is reflective of his character. She went on to defend the Biden administration's record, touting their investments in infrastructure and efforts to lower drug costs and renew relationships with allies abroad. Harris's Republican opponent used a single word in his review of the interview: boring, Trump wrote on Truth Social. The response that Kamala Harris's policy proposals and promises of a new day in American politics have been met with from many Republicans has been this: why haven't those things already happened in the 3.5 years that she's been vice president? In fact, during the interview, Harris shrugged off questions about why she had been vice president for 3.5 years in the Biden administration and had still not implemented the items in her economic plan. That may give a potential opening to the Trump campaign in the days ahead. While Harris said she understands the painful impact of high grocery prices, she was not able to fully account for why they had risen so high under the Biden-Harris administration. Meanwhile, a new poll suggests the Democratic presidential nominee leads her Republican rival 45% to 41%. A Reuters Ipsos poll published on Thursday shows that Kamala Harris is sparking new enthusiasm amongst voters and shaking up the race ahead of the 5th November election. The new poll suggests Harris is picking up support among women and Hispanics.
We are fighting for a democracy. Everyone has a right and should have their voices heard. I am speaking now, but on the subject, I will say this: the president and I are working around the clock. We've got to get a hostage deal done and get a ceasefire done now.
That was Kamala Harris later addressing a rally. All right, time for us to take a quick break here on Global Lens. But on the other side, we're going to discuss with our panel of experts how the interview went for Kamala Harris and what it might mean for her prospects in the upcoming presidential election.
Hey, careful, huh? My daddy got it from abroad. Hey, disaster! How will you pay for the loss now?
In stock market, you should take risk as per your capacity and knowledge. Trade in options very carefully.
Wow, Dikra! Absolutely perfect. Take risk with full understanding.
समझकर, invest कर.
Fast, 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 fast.
My God, isn't she your daughter?
Yes.
She's playing football. This is boys' game. Make her study. If she doesn't get a good job, she will get a good match. Will you win the world by playing football?
Yes, auntie. My daughter will win the world by playing football.
Let's go to Germany.
World's largest football talent hunt, News9 Indian Tigers and Tigresses. In association with DFB Pokal, Bundesliga, BBB and India Football Center. Train and play matches in Europe. Register now and fly to Germany. IndianTigersandTigresses.com.
जानना है तो देखिए, समझना है तो सुनिए, सीखना है तो पूछिए और कमाना है तो खरीदिए। जानकारी, सलाह और निवेश सब एक ही सुपर ऐप पर। पैसे का सवाल है तो जवाब है Money9। आजादी पैसे की, अभी डाउनलोड करें।
So I'm Payal Nath, the CEO and director of Kadam Heart. We're working with people, we're working with emotions, we're working with hands, we're working with nature.
We are very clear, we want to commit to livelihoods, we want to commit to the planet, we want to impact 1 million artisans, which is 1 million families minimum.
Be the change that you want to see.
This and more. Streaming on News9 plus news is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. We're discussing Kamala Harris's first interview as the Democratic presidential nominee and how her prospects are shaping up in the upcoming presidential election. All right, let me introduce our guest. Joining me on Global Lens tonight is Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, former Indian diplomat, Dr. Badrul Alam, former professor of political and international affairs at Jamia Millia Islamia University, and in a moment we're also hoping to be joined by Seema Sirohi, senior journalist and author. Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, if I may begin with you. First and foremost, what did you make of Kamala Harris's first sit-down interview as the Democratic presidential nominee? She was flanked by her running mate, but she did most of the heavy lifting as she was expected to. How do you think she handled the tricky questions, especially when it came to defending the record of the Biden administration?
Well, actually, Neha, that is the drawback that she's facing in her campaign, because some of the policies of the Biden administration are not popular domestically, and it is feared that a strong defense of those policies, as she's obliged to do since she's still the vice president, may drag her down ultimately in the electoral college and in the polls. But to answer your question, she came across direct. She seems to have her facts. She was certainly far more impressive than her running mate, who frankly I did not find very impressive. And she came across as an articulate, well-read woman who knows what she's talking about, and therefore would serve to counter some of the unfortunate negative propaganda against her, which has been unleashed by the other side. So I would say that for a first, it was good, but we have to be aware of the fact that one of the greatest disadvantages that she's facing is that she is vice president of an administration where she did not play a very active role according to public opinion, but now she is being forced to defend policies which are not popular and which can drag her down in the final contest for the big job. So this is a crown of thorns that she's wearing, and she will have to step her way very, very carefully through it. Neha.
Okay, very interesting. You believe she's wearing a crown of thorns as it is difficult to defend the track record of the Biden administration, as many of their policies are rather unpopular at home. But let me also share this with our viewers, as I actually mentioned at the start of the show, that according to the latest Reuters Ipsos poll that was published as recently as yesterday, Kamala Harris is leading Donald Trump 45% to 41%, and she is definitely picking up support amongst women and Hispanics. On that note, let me go across to our next guest, Seema Sirohi. Ms. Sirohi, welcome back to Global Lens. First and foremost, what did you make of Kamala Harris's first sit-down interview as the Democratic presidential nominee? How did she handle the curveballs? And a lot has been said about her change of views on two issues of climate, particularly fracking, and immigration. You know, there are those who are accusing her of backpedaling on this issue. She says that her travels around the country have enlightened her and given her the understanding that you need to build a broad consensus. Significantly, she earlier had asked for decriminalization of illegal border crossings. She now doesn't support that anymore. And as for the bipartisan border security bill, she says, I will ensure that once I'm elected as president, I push that bill into law. Is Kamala Harris doing the right thing by being pragmatic on issues such as immigration, knowing that this is a hot button and very sensitive issue for Americans and is probably going to be one of the defining issues in an election that is now just weeks away?
Hello, so thank you for having me. I would say the interview did the job it was meant to. She didn't get flustered. She was able to answer all the difficult questions. As for the evolution of her positions, she's basically trying to distance herself from the last 3.5 years while not rejecting the legacy of the Biden administration, because she is a part of it. I think the main job she had to do was to show that she's different from former President Donald Trump. She was composed. She didn't rise to the bait. The question that was about her ethnicity and about her being black that Donald Trump had raised, she said it's the same old, next question. I thought that was very well done, not even to get into the ethnicity, because she's not fighting this election necessarily as a woman candidate, which Hillary Clinton had done, and then, that alienated a lot of men, I would say. She's not getting into the gender question, which is wise. She says that, I'm a confident, good candidate. Vote for me for who I am. So I think she did all that very well. In terms of immigration, yes, that is the most difficult question she has to navigate. And she has changed her positions. We didn't get too much detail as to why she changed her position, but obviously the situation on the border has become untenable, and even the Biden administration had to sort of crack down on asylum laws. So that is the reality, and politicians do change their positions. After all, look at Trump. He's trying to backpedal on the abortion issue. So that's just how it happens, I would say.
Well, that's what politicians do all the time, don't they? We've seen that here in India. It happens around the globe. Let me take this to Dr. Badrul Alam. Dr. Badrul Alam, a couple of very interesting points that we must dwell on. One, while it is pragmatic on part of Kamala Harris to come across as now being someone who wants to be tougher on the issue of immigration, which is a very sensitive issue for a vast majority of Americans. But how do you change your views on immigration and, project a different stance without distancing yourself from the record of the Biden administration, which she has been part of for 3.5 years? And number two, Seema Sirohi makes a very interesting point. Isn't it a very smart strategy for Kamala Harris to not lean into her gender and racial identity in this election?
Thank you very much for having me, Neha. I appreciated it. First of all, the interview today, I think Kamala Harris did cross the minimum threshold. I think it was reasonably a good job. She did not make any blunders. She did not say anything out of lines, basically told in a very traditional mainstream ways. I think for her, from now onwards, there are only 60 plus days left. She has to do two things. A, seize the moment, and B, sustain the momentum. Because I think the honeymoon phase that she enjoyed after she was the lead candidate in mid-July after Joe Biden opted out, and in the last week in the DNC convention in Chicago, I think that will soon wear off. So I think now the holidays are coming to an end in US. The Labor Day weekend will be over. I think now more and more American people, and the voters particularly, they will be paying more attention in the next 2 months as to who the candidate is, what the issues are, in which way he is different or similar to Donald Trump or even to Joe Biden. So I think the next 2 months are very crucial in the way she's going to sharpen or she's going to fine tune, or even if it's a nuanced changes on immigration, on climate change, on many other issues, on healthcare, etc. I think at this point of time, I would say she's doing a reasonably good job. And I think going back to, I remember Harry Truman, he says, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I think she's taking the heat. She's in the forefront. And I think she's handling it reasonably well at this point of time.
Okay, very interesting. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, is she taking the heat well? And, what does her performance in this interview tell us about, what we can expect from the first big face-off, the first presidential debate that we're going to see between Trump and Kamala Harris in the next few days?
Well, I can't say that she was able to take all the heat because she evaded the fundamental questions regarding her race, her identity, and her gender. That is heat. She avoided it.
But may I just come in there for a moment, Ambassador? I'm sorry for interrupting you. There are many who actually think this is a clever strategy. As Seema Sirohi mentioned, that, the fact that Hillary Clinton kept talking about smashing that glass ceiling all the way back in 2016 might have alienated some of the male voters in the United States. And having learned that lesson from the Hillary Clinton experience, maybe the Kamala Harris campaign has decided we don't want to go down that route, nor do we want to make this election about her ethnicity or race, because again, that is something that could scare off a lot of people and play right into Trump's hands.
But Neha, I don't agree with all respect with what has been stated, because there is no comparison between Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is a white woman, a lawyer. Her husband was president, and she wanted to smash the glass ceiling, and she won the popular vote. She lost in the electoral college. That could very well happen to Kamala Harris also, because let's not forget that Trump did not get the popular vote. She was far ahead of him, but she still lost the election. Moreover, in the case of Kamala Harris, what is very complex is what Trump had said, which is that for a long time, she portrayed herself as an Indian, and then she decided to change her color and become black because she felt, I'm not sure whether that was so smart, that she would get black votes, because actually black votes go to people in America whose origin is from Africa, not from the Caribbean. Obama's father was from Kenya. Her father is from Jamaica. These are very complex racial issues. I served in United States myself. And she can't evade it, Neha, because it will be raised in the presidential debate and it will continue to follow her right till the end of the campaign. Is she black? How much black is she? What are her perspectives on immigration? If she moves too much to the center, she will alienate the Democrats. If she moves too much to the left, she will alienate the middle Democrats. So it's a very tricky situation. And I think that we must understand that even if Kamala Harris wins the popular vote, she may not win the Electoral College. So it could still go Trump's way. So I don't agree that evading that question was a smart thing to do. In my perspective, in her place, as a woman, I would have taken it head on and answered it. Not said it's the same tire roll question. It's not a tire roll question. It is very fundamental because United States is not, we may think it's multiracial. There's a lot of racism out there,
Yes.
We can't ignore it.
It is a fundamental issue, but you know, again, the problem is that the likes of Trump have whipped up so much hysteria, you know, around the issue of race. They've given rise to so much xenophobia, you know, and the kind of white supremacy wave that we've seen since 2016. I think that's just the kind of issue that Kamala Harris is hoping she would not have to confront head on. Let me quickly get in Seema Sirohi on this issue. Seema Sirohi, there are those who will say that Kamala Harris is not black enough for the black voters of the United States. Ambassador Mukherjee says there is no circumventing this issue. It's a very fundamental issue in American politics, whether we like it or not. Race matters. This is something she will need to confront. What is your take?
Look, she was raised as a black girl by her mother. It was a very conscious decision. They lived within the black community in California, and the black community embraced the family. At that time, there weren't enough Indians in California when these two sisters were young girls. So the question, if anything, has been raised by Indians whether she embraces her Indian part of the heritage enough or not. That she is black and that she has embraced her blackness is not in doubt. She went to a black college. She's part of the oldest black sorority. The black women held a Zoom call where, I don't know, thousands of women participated. So I don't think that is any more in question. The black community is coming out in support of her. Indian Americans too are coming out. They're all energized because I think the larger question in this election is the tiredness of the American people with grievances, with the dark vision that Trump paints all the time. They want to move on because Americans at the end of the day are an optimistic lot. They don't want to go back. So that's why her slogan, "We are not going back," is kind of working, in my opinion. If in the debate she gets a question on her ethnicity, I think she is very capable of answering it. Multiple identities. Many Americans have multiple identities. Why isn't it a question posed to white Americans? You know, they're Irish, they're German, they're Polish. There is a lot of mixture in this society. So I think she can handle it. I don't think it's something that the campaign is overly worried about.
Okay, it's something she's smart enough to handle. There is no doubt that she represents a microcosm of the very essence of the United States. It is a country made up of immigrants. It's the largest melting pot in the world. However, Donald Trump will, of course, try and corner her on this issue because, of course, as we know, he is the poster boy for MAGA. All right, time for us to take a quick break here on Global Lens. Don't go anywhere because we'll continue this conversation on the other side.
fan of Ian Bell, watching him very classy in all formats.
I find Durban quite a challenge, which is still an enjoyable one.
You're not allowed to bowl a bouncer, so that tells you that they want to see runs on the board.
बड़े अच्छे अच्छे टूर्स किए हैं, बड़ी अच्छी अच्छी यादें हैं हर जगह की, जहाँ मैंने पर्सनली क्रिकेट को बहुत एंजॉय किया, ऑस्ट्रेलिया एंड इंडिया में बहुत ज़्यादा एंजॉय किया.
I love playing against England and India, and they were both very different challenges.
Up close and personal with legendary cricketers like never before. Icons of the pitch.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
One of my friends was residing here. Every rainy season, he will take his mom or otherwise even the dog also, pet dog also, he will take the pet dog and go to the resort, which is at Banasura Sagar Dam. This time around, he didn't. So, completely washed out. There is no idea about my friend.
हमारा फैमिली में रिलेटेड फैमिली था और उसके रिलेशन में तकरीबन 20 लोग मरा हुआ. अभी हमको पता नहीं सलाह भी मिलेगा नहीं मिलेगा. अभी 5 दिन हो गया.
Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Joe Biden is not going to be the Democratic presidential nominee.
I made my choice. Kamala Harris. She's experienced. She's tough. She's capable.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds, predators. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
I am the one saving democracy.
He has tapped into the fear and anxiety about demographic change in the US.
This polarization in the United States. Some people are even suggesting that there could be a civil war.
You are this unable to solve your own domestic problems. You have no right to claim to be anybody else in the world, and we're moving into a multipolar world where the United States will not lead.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing the US presidential contest and Kamala Harris's first interview as a presidential nominee. Seema Sirohi, I want to come back to you at this point. We've talked about Kamala Harris's gender and ethnicity, her views, or shall we say shifting positions on issues such as immigration. But perhaps the biggest criticism that's being leveled against her, and not just by Republicans, is this: that if she feels so strongly about some of the economic policies that she has outlined, well, then why were these not implemented while she was Vice President of the United States for 3.5 years? She says she feels the pain of the middle class because of high grocery prices, the high cost of living, but she's not been able to explain why these prices went up so high in the first place under the Biden-Harris administration. In fact, some polls seem to suggest that voters actually prefer Trump's handling of the economy. Therefore, my question is distancing herself from the Biden legacy a viable option for Kamala Harris at this point in time?
Well, we'll just have to wait and see, because in answer to that question, yesterday she talked about how at the beginning of the administration they had to recover from the pandemic. And that is indeed true. People have this rosy picture of the Trump administration and, the economy doing well, but people forget that the pandemic had started and there was a lot of problem here, economic problems. So they, injected a lot of money, the Biden administration did, into the economy. Some people say that maybe that's what caused the inflation. Yes, these are questions that are going to have to be addressed by her, and I'm sure Trump is going to hold her to account in the debate, and hopefully she'll have figured it out by then. So her answers about grocery prices being so high and people are price gouging, those are, there are two different points of view on that. Some people, some economists do think that these huge conglomerates are gouging and their margins are bigger than they let on. And the people are suffering, even though supply chains have become better, the prices haven't come down because these big companies have got used to the profit margins, which are, which became bigger. They raised the prices, but they're not lowering the prices, even though goods are available. So she'll have to argue that out, no doubt. It is one issue on which Trump does do better in the polls, as he does on immigration.
Trump is doing better in the polls on the issues of economy and immigration. Should that be a source of worry for the Kamala Harris campaign? Dr. Alam, let me put this question to you. She talks about how inflation is hurting the working class and she understands their pain. While it would be correct to say that the US economy has actually done far better than expected in recent years, but inflation continues to be a pain point for a vast majority of Americans. Now, every time Kamala Harris talks about the pain of the working class and high grocery prices, she is going to be asked, why didn't you do more to address this issue while you were the vice president for 3.5 years? Do you not believe that this is an issue on which Trump will definitely pin her down, especially during the upcoming debate?
I think that's a very valid question. But before that, Neha, I would like to respond to the earlier question that you put to Ambassador Mukherjee and Seema Sirohi about Kamala Harris being a black candidate or of the Asian origin. I think if you look back 50, 60 years ago, like 1950s, etc., at the end of the segregation, Brown versus Board of Education, the civil rights laws that was enacted during Johnson administration in the mid-60s, and then Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Civil Rights Movement, I Have a Dream speech, and in the mid-1980s, we have a very viable black candidate, Reverend Jesse Jackson. And finally, I think the glass ceiling has already been broken with Barack Obama, the first black and African-American person to get elected twice, back-to-back in 2008 and 2012. And also, not only as a president, but also if you look at some important states like Massachusetts, the former governor of Massachusetts, Patrick Doble, and the senator from New Jersey, Cory Booker, there are a number of African-American politicians in both Congress, in the House, as well as in the Senate. They have made a name for himself. So I think just being a black, I don't think that's a liability. So again, it depends on how many people might go out to vote. For example, a state like Georgia.
On the contrary, Dr. Alam, I don't think it's anyone's argument that being a black woman is a liability. On the contrary, Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee made the point that she may not be black enough for the black voters of America.
I think it might go to her advantage, particularly if the Asian American community, which are in a big numbers in states like Nevada, for example, in Sunbelt states in North Carolina, in Arizona, etc. I think she might get up the votes that Biden was successful in 2020. So I think it is quite possible the voter drives in the next couple of weeks, I think. Because if you remember, in the last election 3.5 years ago, Biden just scraped through in Arizona, in Georgia, etc. So if Kamala Harris is able to sustain that, if she's able to do that, on the top of the Rust Belt states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, I think she can very well cross the 270. Not only that, my own hunch is, at this point of time, if this momentum is sustained, she may get little more than what Biden got in 2020 or Trump got in 2016 by crossing well over 270. That's the required of the Electoral College votes. Going back to the economy things, yes, I do agree with Seema Sirohi and also Ambassador Mukherjee. that yes, it is the pocketbook analogy. When people do go to vote on November 5th, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? But I think in this election, people are not only looking at economy per se, but they are also looking in its totality, in a very cumulative ways, looking at the issues of pro-life versus pro-choice, looking at the crime issues, looking at the healthcare issues. Will my Medicare and Medicaid be safeguarded, or is the Project 2025 is going to swallow it up? So I think the whole picture and how the things are playing out externally in Gaza, in South China Sea, in Ukraine, etc. So I think people will take a more cumulative views, in a more holistic views when they do go to vote on November 5.
Okay, interesting you mentioned the Israel war there, because Israel war in Gaza, because she seems to be, playing the both sidism game here, so to speak. She says that Israel has every right to defend itself, but too many Palestinian civilians have been killed. We must get that deal at the earliest. There's got to be a ceasefire. The Biden administration is working around the clock to make that happen. But when specifically asked if she as president will impose an arms embargo on Israel in certain cases, as some who are on the left of the center in the Democratic Party would want her to do, she was completely non-committal on that. Let me now take this back to Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee. Ambassador Mukherjee, Seema Sirohi made this point earlier that, Donald Trump is like Grim Reaper, as it were, painting such a dark picture of where America stands today and where it is headed, constantly instilling fear in people. And that is why it seems that Kamala Harris's campaign is making a studied attempt to, focus on the theme of joy, of not going back, of moving ahead. They are trying to focus on the themes of hope and optimism for the future. Now, do you believe that, coupled with the fact that Kamala Harris clearly scores over Donald Trump on the issue of abortion and women's rights, do you believe that these are issues that could work in her favor?
Neha, you have, in a masterly manner, underlined the issues which have deeply polarized and divided America. So those very same issues that you're talking about, reproductive health, abortion, immigration, happiness, these issues may come right back to haunt her, because it's a deeply polarized America on both sides. And on top of that, there is no guarantee that the Asian community will vote for her in strength. Many of the Asian community are staunch Republicans, and they may see in Trump an opportunity for business, which Kamala Harris does not, because, as you rightly pointed out, she is ambiguous, probably because of political necessity, on some very key issues. It's not just Gaza. It's also economic policy. It's a question of China, for instance. There are many who feel that if Trump comes to power, he may be able to cool things down so that the world which is looking at a possible third world war may not happen if Trump comes, because Trump does not want the United States to get dragged into a war. So these are issues which can play out either way. And I don't share the optimism of my two panelists who feel that Kamala Harris will be able to sweep the Electoral College. I think, on the contrary, her problem is the Electoral College, because even if she gets women's vote, black vote, etc., considering how polarized the American society is at the moment, deeply polarized, just getting more polarized by the day because of the manner in which Trump's campaign is moving, it is actually very, very difficult for us right now to predict whether, even if she makes it more in the popular vote, she will be able to sweep the Electoral College. And nor would I predict at this point of time that she is going to sweep the Asian community. I would not make that prediction.
Very interesting, very interesting. You were saying Kamala Harris should not be betting on the South Asian community voting for her. But as we wrap up this discussion, Seema Sirohi, I'll give you the last word. You want to respond to what Ambassador Mukherjee is saying. You know, no matter how much Kamala Harris tries to focus on hope and optimism for the future and, you know, a new day for America, the ambassador makes the point that ultimately it all boils down to the Electoral College. Let's not forget what happened to Hillary Clinton in 2016, and whether we like it or not, this is a huge flaw in the US presidential system.
Absolutely. No, I agree with the ambassador that the Electoral College is where it will be decided, and the battle is very close. But all the polls are showing that now the race is statistically tied. So it'll be, the election will be decided in the battleground states and on the margins by a few thousand votes. Nobody is disputing that. So that's what the battle is about. That's what she's aiming for Republicans who are disappointed by Trump, who will not vote for Trump. She wants to attract them. She said in the interview yesterday that she will include a Republican in her cabinet, a tradition that was followed back in the day of Obama and George W. Bush. So all these are aims to get that extra vote. And remember, Indian Americans in particular are not enamored of the Christian nationalism that is very much a part of the Trump campaign. Indians are like, you know, they don't want religion to come into daily life in the way the Trump campaign is doing. And they're also wary of all this, you know, strict abortion laws that states have passed now. You know, he says it's up to the states to decide. Well, the states are deciding in a very negative way from the point of view of women. So women are energized. Republican women are also angry about the right being taken away by...
And no matter how progressive he may now try to sound, or ambivalent for that matter, he cannot wash his hands off Roe v. Wade being set aside. He's even taken credit for it in the past.
By the 3 Supreme Court justices that he appointed. He just simply cannot back away from that.
He cannot back away from that. That definitely means that a huge chunk of women votes are not going to Donald Trump. But does that mean that it'll be enough to see Kamala Harris home in this election? That is the million-dollar question. As Seema Sirohi says, it's going to be a tight contest, and it promises to be a fascinating one. It's been great having all of you on the show. Seema Sirohi, Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, Dr. Badrul Alam. It's been a fascinating discussion. I look forward to having all of you back on Global Lens. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. All right, from the US presidential elections, let's now turn our attention back home. Let's get you the latest on what External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has said on India's foreign policy. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar today said the era of uninterrupted dialogue with Pakistan is over, and added that New Delhi stands ready to react to developments across the border, whether positive or negative. Speaking at a private event in Delhi, Jaishankar issued a stern warning to Pakistan, saying actions have consequences. He said the issue is what kind of relationship can we contemplate with Pakistan. On a suggestion that India's content with the relationship continuing as is, he said maybe yes, maybe no, but what I want to say is that we are not passive, and whether events take a positive or negative direction, either way, we will react. On Bangladesh, Dr. Jaishankar said it's natural. We will deal with the government of the day. We have to recognize that there have been political changes and they can be disruptive. Clearly, here we have to look for mutuality of interest. The foreign minister also spoke about India-Maldives ties, saying there have been ups and downs in our approach to the Maldives. There is a certain lack of consistency, but it's a relationship in which we are deeply invested.
So let me say this. I think the era of uninterrupted dialogue with Pakistan is over. Actions have consequences. And insofar as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, I think 370 is done. So the issue today is what kind of relationship can we possibly contemplate with Pakistan. Rajiv suggests that perhaps India is content to continue at the current level of relationship. Maybe yes, maybe no. What I do want to say is we are not passive, and whether events take a positive or a negative direction, either way we will react to it. Where Maldives is concerned, again, we've had ups and downs, not just in the nature of the region. There have been ups and downs in our own approach to Maldives. You know, we've had the 1988 intervention, but yet we were very impassive in 2012 when there was a change of government. So you can see that, you know, there's a certain lack of constancy here. But I would say that, you know, it is a relationship in which we are very deeply invested. And there is today a recognition in Maldives, certainly I saw that in my recent visit, that this relationship is a steadying force as they get into somewhat choppy waters where their own prospects are concerned, especially in terms of the economic challenges.
The women of Afghanistan are exhibiting great courage by staging a unique protest against the Taliban's latest diktat and absolutely draconian so-called morality laws that seek to further oppress women and push them completely out of public spaces. This time, the women are protesting through music. In a series of videos posted on social media, Afghan women can be heard singing. This is part of a broader online protest against a new law that bans women from speaking in public. The law announced by the Taliban last week requires, amongst other things,